in the room silence.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Good morning, Udayana Singh, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Yeah, here. Welcome, sir.
Good morning.
Most welcome.
उदय जी गुड मॉर्निंग अनीसुर रहमान
Good morning.
हाउ आर
Anisur.
यू कैसे हैं
बिल्कुल.
थैंक्स
Yes, sir. Shall we begin?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Good morning to one and all present here on this virtual platform for 3-day e-conference on translation and E-quip, text identity, politics and cultural survival. On behalf of the Department of English, Kareem City College, Untitled Chapter, I welcome all of you in the inaugural session of this mega academic week. I hope that it will be an enriching experience for all of us. I hereby take immense pride in introducing the host college to you. The 6-decade-old Kareem City College is a Muslim minority institution run and managed by Kareemia Trust. Our college has earned the reputation of being one of the most promising colleges of Eastern Zone of India by exhibiting student-centric approach and committed academic advice. The college works under the umbrella of Pulhan University, Chaibasa, and we are glad that the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University, Professor Dr. Gangadhar Panda himself is present today to grace the occasion as the chief guest for the inaugural session. I'm sure his words of wisdom and motivation will enhance the integrity of our endeavor. As the member of academia, we all understand the significance of the keynote address, and we are extremely glad and delighted and honored to have with us Professor Udayana Singh to deliver the keynote address today. His excellence in the field of literature is widely accepted in the country and abroad, and he has joined us today right from Gurugram, Haryana. We welcome you, sir, with utmost respect and gratitude in this inaugural ceremony. Professor in charge of Kareem City College, Dr. Muhammad Riaz, is also with us, ready to take the responsibility of the generous host and to formally welcome you all for being part of this inaugural function. I take this opportunity to acknowledge his motivation behind organizing this conference. His persistent encouragement has been instrumental in bringing all of us together today. I commence the program and invite Dr. Muhammad Riaz, sir, to offer welcome address to our chief guest, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Gangadhar Panda, sir, keynote speaker, Professor Udayana Singh, sir, and to each one who have joined us, of course, virtually.
Thank you, Neha. Good morning, everybody present here today. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Pulhan University, Chaibasa, Professor Dr. Gangadhar Panda, keynote speaker, Professor Udayana Singh, renowned academician and scholar from all parts of the country. Today is a very special day for me as I welcome you all to this 3-day international web conference on translation and the global text identity, politics and cultural survival organized by the Department of English, Kareem City College, Jamshedpur. We as a college have been constantly making effort during this pandemic to keep the academic flag flying high. Apart from online classes, e-study material and video lecture, our teachers have been constantly coming up with various academic endeavors to keep students creatively engaged with the task of learning. The Department of English has been especially active in its online initiative during the last few months. It has organized a wonderful series of web lectures by academics from all over the country under its banner E-Academy. It has also conducted an exclusive series of talks under its banner Writer Beyond Distance, is in which famed writers like Ketai N. Daruwala, Tavish Khair, Geeta Hariharan, G. N. Devi, etc. have spoken to our students. This three-day web conference is the first online conference that the department and our college as a whole has come up with. I am very glad that an area as significant as translation has been chosen for our first web conference. We are aware that today translation is survival and to be locked up in a monolithic idea of meaning is death. Only through effective translation is it possible to build a harmonious and progressive community. And I hope that this three-day conference will give us valuable insight into the dynamics of translation in its various aspects. I again welcome Honorable Vice Chancellor of Kulhan University, Chaibasa, Professor Dr. Gangadhar Panda, for consenting to grace this occasion. I am also proud and honored today to welcome among us Dr. Udayana Singh, a scholar of international repute and loved all over the nation. I also welcome all academicians who have joined with us. I also take this opportunity to congratulate the Department of English for organizing this program. I wish this program a grand and heartily success. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you very much, sir, for your warm welcome to all our viewers and listeners across the globe. Moving forward in this inaugural session, it is time to request the chief guest of the program, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. for his inaugural address. But before he starts addressing us, I would like to mention that he has taken up charge as the Vice Chancellor of the University only a couple of months ago. But in this short period, he has shown tremendous commitment to escalate the academic atmosphere of Kulhan University, despite all odds created by pandemic. There is no doubt that for the academic activity of any college, the presence of Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University as the chief guest is a very generic, very organic choice. But we feel very fortunate to have him here because apart from being the Vice Chancellor of the University, Professor Dr. Gangadhar Panda is an academician par excellence. He has command over many languages, but he's master of Sanskrit language, which itself is the mother of many languages. There would have been no better choice than serve as chief guest of this literary conference on translation and global. We indeed feel privileged having you here, sir, in both the capacities. Now, very humbly, I invite Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, to address this virtual gathering of literati. Professor Gangadhar Panda.
Are you able to hear me, madam?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I welcome all of you, the principal of this Karim City College, Dr. Muhammad Riaz, and the director of this college, Dr. Jakaria ji, and our honorable guest who will give keynote address, Professor Udayana Singh ji of Delhi, and Dr. Ibrahim ji, and Madam Neha Tiwari ji, and other scholars and professors of English department in particular, and other professors of other department, those who are engaged to bring this webinar a meaningful. I congratulate and welcome from the core of my heart on behalf of Kulhan University. Actually, the topic chosen by the department and the class has meaning, because nowadays we are feeling and witnessing many problems about the translation. And our forefathers, that means the scholars and our predecessors, they have also given importance of this translation. So I will give some examples. Max Muller, a scholar of Germany, has translated whole Vedas, not only Vedas, all sacred books of India. The series, The Sacred Book from the East, has been published by Max Muller in German language. Later, it was translated into English. That is where our Indian culture was spread all over the globe due to this translation. Similarly, Dr. Roth, Dr. McDonnell, Dr. Keith, Weber, etc., they have also translated our Indian literature, and that is why they are making for this effort. India is becoming Vishwaguru. That is a dream which is now felt. So I will quote Sir William Jones, who has translated Abhigyan Sakuntalam in English. That is why we compare that Kalidasa maybe this Shakespeare may be compared with Kalidasa of our country, though there is some time gap between Kalidasa and Shakespeare. Similarly, Dara Shikoh, a great scholar, a son of Akbar, he has translated all, most probably many Upanishads into Arabic, and these have been translated in Persian also. That is why, and I will give some example from our modern scholars. Gitanjali, the famous writings of Rabindranath Tagore, has been translated, and that has been, for this he has got this Nobel Puraskar and all these things. So, to sum up this issue, I will tell that translation has great value. And there are several kind of translation. And one is exact translation, and another is bhavatmaka translation. For example, the Ramayana was written by Valmiki, but it was translated by Tulsidas in form of Ramcharitamanas. That is not the exact translation. That is Bhavanubada, which has been incorporated in Awadhi language. And because the language, Sanskrit language, was very critical, it was difficult to understand unless translation is not given. But when the same was written in another from the Tulsidas, Ramcharitamanas has become famous. That is why the translation has a great value. And the present topic, translation and the local text and identity, politics and cultural survival. So this topic says that because if translations has been influenced by the political people and the academia into their own interest, that is why how the translation should not be influenced by all the people, and exact translation should come out. For that, what measures and what should be taken by the scholars, that is to be clearly understood. And I think there are so many scholars. There are 3 days. 3 days program has been designed, and I will try to listen whenever time will permit me. Actually, this was very interesting, and I trust this webinar, this online webinar, which we are going to conduct for 3 days, will have a meaningful outcome. I hope some new things will definitely emerge in the field of translation studies. And there are, of course, so many institutions which are looking after all these things. That in Hyderabad, For this translation studies, there is an Institute of English and Foreign Language. They are also doing this field. And for Sanskrit, Rashtriya Sanskrit Sansthan is there. And our Sahitya Academy, they are also translating in the mother tongue those work, those treaties which have been given the National Award or Nobel Puraskars. So this is the work of the Sahitya Academy and other local academies that translations work should be done. That is why our text which have been popular, if we translated in the regional languages, it will have meaning, and the message in that text will come to the common people. That is the main of the translation. The translation works should be very authentic, and that should be trustworthy, that can always be examined when demanded. In this way, I think this 3-day seminar will go in this way, so that people will be influenced, will be motivated to do the correct translation without being influenced by other people, by any force. It may be administrative force, it may be academic force, it may be political force. Without any corruption, without being influenced, something should come. And with this, I congratulate the Department of English in particular, and the whole management of Karim City College, and other people, those who are associated with this. I will take only few words about Karim City College. Now, when I joined, I saw we have 20 constituent colleges, and Karim City College is one of the is only college of the minority group. And I have got an occasion to visit this college few days ago. I saw this infrastructure is very good. The sanitation is also very good. Staffs are well behaved, well managed. I think it is one of the best colleges under this Kolan University. I feel proud myself that I am the Vice Chancellor of such a college, under which the Karim City College flourishing and in achieving the goal of higher education. With this, I conclude, and before that, I cannot control myself to utter a word of Robert Frost, that we should not satisfy with the work what we have done. We shall go on. That is, the woods are lovely, dark and deep. I have promises to keep, miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. With this, I conclude. Thank all of you inviting me for this meaningful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice Chancellor, for your generous words for the appreciation of the college. And we are very much thankful that you have consented to be with us and spoken about the translation and transcreation, which is so much prevalent, especially in India. We have never believed in a word in translation, but always there has been a transcreation. And yes, we are very much hopeful, and we solicit your constant guidance and support in our future endeavors as well. As I have been informed that Sir has some other engagements today, so he may get you, in between. But we would like to thank him for joining in for this inaugural session. And now it's time to call upon convener of the conference, Dr. Yahya Ibrahim, sir, to talk about the motive and objectives behind organizing this conference. Dr. Yahya Ibrahim is also the head of the Department of English in Karim City College and is known for his hard work and dedication towards educational activities. Under his progressive and energetic leadership, Department of English of Karim City College is creating a niche for itself. I invite him to elaborate on this e-conference and also introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Udayana Singh. Dr. Ibrahim.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Before I formally begin my concept note, or rather the convener's note, I would just like to inform this August gathering that we had 1,200 around registrations for this international conference. We have allowed only a few here, our dignitaries, our guests, and the paper presenters here in this Google Meet. And this whole event, this whole conference is going live on YouTube, and all our participants and other audience are also there. Thank you very much, Neha ma'am. Respected dignitaries and dear delegates of this 3-day international web conference on translation and the global, a heartiest welcome to you all. This web conference is the partial dream fulfillment of several dreams which we as the college and we as the department had. The dreams which I personally had, and the dreams which I and my colleague Dr. Basudhara Roy shared. I'm saying this that it is a partial fulfillment because we wanted to welcome you all here at Jamshedpur in person for this conference. From the last personally lived with the dream of inviting the revered Professor Udayana Singh to an academic event of our college. It has been partially fulfilled because sir is here online, but it will be complete when we will receive him here at Jamshedpur in person. From last few years, Basudhara and I dreamt to do something on translation. This web conference is a partial fulfillment of that honest wish of ours. We at the Department of English, Karim City College, have tried very honestly to make the conference a food for thought for all those who are the travelers of the tricky tour of translation. As organizers, we are hopeful that this conference will not only answer the inquisitiveness with regard to translation as a field of academics, but also raise valid questions about translation as a field of practice. The 3-day discourse that we will be able to generate through this conference will surely look at the various theories at work in translation, different applications, and the wide variety of interpretations that the act of translation may generate. We all know that as an interdisciplinary field of a study, it borrows from comparative literature, culture, history, linguistics, philology, philosophy, semiotics, and technology and computer sciences. As organizers, we will be more than happy if this conference can generate a discussion on all these aspects, because this will certainly prove very enriching for our young participants. One important aspect of the act of translation is related to translation of religious texts and the translation of knowledge texts. As we all know that the act of translating religious texts may lead to blasphemy or at least an allegation for that. Similarly, the translation of knowledge text may lead to treason or at least an allegation of being an anti-national. So, thank God, this conference of ours is primarily revolving around literature. But do you think that translating literature is free from any threat? Certainly not. The very act of translating a literary text or the reading of the translated text always leads to the questions of transliteration, transcreation, self-translation, etc., etc. The translation of landscape and culture has always been my keen interest, and I very keenly look towards the act of adaptation and adulteration by the translator of a literary text. To end my note, I would like to draw your attention towards a very important key word of the conference, and that is global. What is this? How do I personally look at it? True that we have taken this word from the bazaar, and it is primarily related with the present liberal global economy. But can translation be seen as a translocal process? Can we see translation as the localization of the global or the globalization of the local? Dear dignitaries, much that is considered local in translation isn't it counterpoised to become global? One more thing which we cannot ignore. When we think of globalization, we cannot ignore cultural imperialism. It is true that translating the local may produce a global discourse, but it is also true that it may take us to the razor edge of cultural imperialism. And lastly, I can also see that the act or the process of translation may also draw towards the mechanics of fragmentation, homogenization, heterogenization, and hybridity. And not to forget about the turbulations of a translator who is translating the margins and the marginalized. So this is, and for all this, for looking at all these aspects, we certainly have our very revered Professor Udayana Singh here as the keynote speaker. And I'm extremely personally and on behalf of my college also is very thankful that he consented to deliver the keynote address. Any introduction of Uday sir is minimum. And I request those students and the young participants of ours joining us today here to go to his website and look at the huge work that he has done in the field of literature, translation, and language studies. Professor Udayana Singh, sir, is a major linguist, a translator, a lexicographer, and a creative writer. Born at Calcutta, he is a grassroots bilingual in Matholi and Bangla. I would also like to add that he's constantly writing in Hindi and English also. So he's bilingual, yes, Mathili and Bangla, but let us add English and Hindi also. Presently, Singh sir is the Dean, Faculty of Arts and Chair Professor, MIT Center for Linguistic Studies, MIT University, Haryana. Before that, he was the Pro-Vice Chancellor, or rather the first Pro-Vice Chancellor of Vishwa Bharati. And before that, the Professor Udayana Singh, whom I know, was the Director of Central Institute of Indian Languages, CIIL, Ministry of Human Resource Development, located at Mysore. Before that, he had the experience of working with the University of Delhi, MS University, Baroda, South Gujarat University, and presently, and in the past also, he was associated with a lot of journals and magazines. For example, just taking a few, that he was the editor of Indian Linguistics, that is the Journal of Linguistic Society of India. He was the editor, along with Professor P.P. Girdhar, he was the editor of Translation Today. He was the chief editor of Mathili Darshan. Rather, he is the editor of Mathili Darshan because it is continuously circulating and it is perhaps the largest circulating literary magazine in Mathili. He was also, or he is also, the chairman of the jury for the last 15 years for the highest literary award in Mathili named Prabodh Sahitya Samman. I have just dared rather, and I seek pardon of our key speaker, sir, that I have cut the biodata short, but to tell you very honestly that he has authored 27 books. He has edited 22 books, and he has translated 9 books. So the number goes up to more than near about 60, we can say. He has published 8 collection of poems. Among his creative books, he has published 8 collection of poems, 9 plays, 5 books of literary essays, besides translating, as I said, 9 books in special reference to translation of Tagore's complete work on children's literature from Bangla into Maithili for Sahitya Academy, and translation of Tagore's The Original Gitanjali from Bangla to English. Singh sir has the distinction of being the chief editor of Indian Linguistics, editor with P.P. Girdhar sir of Translation Today, as I said earlier, and the general editor of Longman CIIL series of 11 bilingual dictionaries. He is the member life member of a few societies, for example, Linguistic Society of India, Dravidian Linguistic Association, Indian Journal of Applied Linguistics and Language Forums like American Studies Research Center, Hyderabad, Indian Association of Canadian Studies, Indian Comparative Literature Association, Indian Association for Commonwealth Literature, just to name a few. And again, just to name a few, that honors and rewards that came on his way, that he received in 2018 the Sahitya Academy Award for Maithili Poetry for his book Jhalak Diary. He was awarded Sir Ganganath Memorial Award for his contributions to Maithili literature. He was also awarded Jyotirishwar Samman 2016 for his contribution to Maithili theatre in National School of in the National School of Drama Auditorium at New Delhi. He was awarded the Suniti Kumar Chatterjee National Lectureship Award in 2016, and also awarded with Kalagnar Pokizi Award by some organization in Chennai. The Mithila Vibhuti Samman and the Kriti Narayan Mishra Award. So just a few awards to his name. He supervised as director of or consultant several projects. For example, the Language Movement Project of the Center of Social Studies, MS University, Baroda, and then the digital documentation by SASNet and SEDA, Sweden, machine translation by MC and IT, Linguistic Data Consortium of Indian Languages, that is very famous as LDCIL, which is located again at Mysore, that is a Government of India project. Besides this, he was the chief of National Translation Mission when it was conceptualized by the Government of India. He was, perhaps, if I'm not wrong, the first director who was very much influential and instrumental to get this project implemented by the Government of India. Then again, also the chief consultant of Microsoft validation project for Vista. Then the joint project on Bangla Online project. The director of CIAL SAG Ministry of Defense, he was involved in the spoken corpora and contemporary corpora projects in Hindi, Bangla and Manipuri. Then in addition, he conceived, and this is a huge contribution that Sir has done to languages. I personally believe that it is a great contribution which will be remembered in the cultural history and the linguistic history of India. And that is that he conceived and executed 560 films under Bhasha Mandakini project, which were made on Bangla, Tamil and Kannada language, literature and culture. So that is a huge thing that was done by Sir. At Vishwa Bharati, when he was the Pro-Vice Chancellor there, or rather I would like to say the first Pro-Vice Chancellor there, he directed the biggest humanities and social sciences project named Center for Endangered Languages project which is a project by the UGC. And just to inform you that he was the founder chairman of Center for Applied Linguistics and Translation Studies at Hyderabad. He visited Australia, Andorra, Bangladesh, the Caribbean islands, China, France, Germany, the Democratic Republic of Germany, and then the Unified Germany also, Iceland, Italy, Japan, Mauritius, Nepal, Pakistan, Russia, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Spain, Sweden, Thailand, and the United Kingdom and the United States of America. He led the Indian cultural delegation to China in 2007 and 8, as a member of Indian delegation to Italy in the year 1999, to Trinidad and Tobago, and then as a poet invitee at the Frankfurt Book Fair 2006, and also as the poet invitee at London Book Fair 2009, a member of the delegation of the Ministry of Culture at UNESCO Paris and Dhaka, Bangladesh. He was a member of Indian delegation of UNESCO, France and USA during 2010 and 12 at Russia, Thailand and China. I'm cutting again the introduction short, that he has delivered, that he had given a data of some of the recent things that he has done. So very recently, in the last 4, 5, 6 years, he has delivered 55 prestigious keynote addresses and lectures and plenary sessions, etc. That he has published 215 or more than that research papers. That in the year 2000, from the year 2011 and 14 only, during these 3 years, he was he participated in around 58 national and international seminar and conferences, etc. And as I said, that he has translated books, 9 books of essays, of poetry from Maithili to Bangla to Hindi and to English. So any introduction to such a dignitary, to such a man of excellence, is very minimum. With humblest gratitude on our part, with lot of thanks on our part, with lot of reverence and respect on our part, we request Sir to take over the session. Sir, please.
Not audible, I think. Yeah. Sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Can't hear anything.
I think he has not started speaking.
Udayaji, you need to unmute your mic, please. If you do that, we'll be able.
Can I am I audible now?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, you are.
Can you see my screen?
No, we
Yes,
cannot.
the screen is not visible, sir. You are visible.
Okay, let me try to put the screen thing.
Yeah, it is now visible, sir.
Okay, it's visible to everybody?
It is coming. It says presenting. Yeah, it is visible.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, I'm learning. Okay. The topic of my lecture today is the original reborn. Doesn't translation take us beyond language? Please stop me or ask me to repeat if you don't hear me properly. Now, long ago, in fact, let me first of all say that I'm very embarrassed the way Yahya described me, my work. But long ago in 1966, I had published my first book of poems in Maithili, titled Kavayo Vadanti. We know Maithili is a very marginal language in Nepal and in India. And there I had a poem called Anuswara and Visarga. Now, we all know about our writing system, our lipi in which Anuswara and Visarga are the untouchables. The major important part of the writing system or our lipi is the consonant and the vowels. We know that syllables can't stand straight without the vowels. We know that consonants give us so much of noise. But the Anuswara and Visarga of all communities are the dispensable lot. They can be forgotten about. Now today, on our quest for authentic and quest for original in music, in food, in design, expressions, the dialects have been coming to the forefront. In fact, those of you who are avid readers of Hindi and Bangla literature would know that a lot of very interesting writings are coming up from the regional variation of these languages rather than from the mainstream pedantic varieties of these languages. Now, since I've been translating a lot from different languages using different language pairs, a lot of people ask me, why don't you translate your own poems from actually into global languages? That way, you can at least bring your own poems and your own language from periphery to the center state. Not that I have done some bit of it, and I have done something for the others as well, like Tagore's translation. And the only book of poems which I had completely done was Madhyam Purush Ek Vachan, my 2006 book, which was meant for the Frankfurt Book Fair, and before that it was published in English by Katha, under Katha Poets Cafe, as second person singular, and by Draupadi Verlag in Heidelberg as zweite person singular in Germany. Now, we know that the problem with these translations from small languages into the major languages, major world languages like English or German, or even into Hindi, it's a tough job, because look at the way these languages are located and the way the scheduled and the non-scheduled languages of India are related. In terms of the number, sheer number, they're very small. And if you look at the Hindi versus other languages, Hindi with other mother tongue, there is small mother tongues of Hindi, could be Harauti, it could be Bilwari, it could be Maghi, it could be Bhojpuri. If you look at them, 20.22% of the Hindi space is dominated by these. And therefore, it's very crucial that we pay attention to many of these smaller varieties. In fact, a lot of innovations that happen, they happen because of use of some of these smaller speech varieties in writing. Now, what goes on in the name of Hindi speech community would include most parts of other Indian states and Union territories like Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Delhi, Haryana, we know up to Rajasthan, Uttarakhand. Now, one day we see that something which was earlier a boli, which is only a speech variety, like Khadi Boli, has become the epicenter. And all other bolis have been relegated to the background. In contrast, something which was earlier the standard way of writing, like Brajbhasha or Agadhi, literary poetic standards, they got relegated to the background, to the periphery. So nevertheless, the journey from the local to the global, we do remember that, as I said, quite often it's the vernaculars that supply the endless originality. Otherwise, as original authors and thinkers in India, we do acknowledge that we write in so many languages and speak in so many voices. In fact, India has emerged as a space that has absorbed numerous beliefs, thoughts, practices of lives, and countless number of speech varieties. Now, she has always been a singular country with plural expressions. But does it mean that as cultural space, when we are saying that we are assimilating so much in India, are we saying that we are drowning the original voices and what survives is only the replica in translation? That is something which worries me, that has to be thought about. I have discussed some of these issues in my National Book Trust book called India Writes, which gives an account of 22 Indian literature presented to Frankfurt Book Fair. So let us explore the consequences. Of course, there was a time when we only composed in oral texts. We know that. Early on, we converted ourselves into a written culture. Well, that happened because we realized that what the written, painted, sculpted, printed word can achieve, howsoever original, speech can never achieve that. We realized that not having one's own feelings, commands, wishes expressed graphically will have no value in a material world, where you trust only the written word. It's a different time when we said that pran jai par bachan na jai. But today, it's the written word. A lot of people say, give it to me in writing. So, written word is trusted. In a way, we lost the original, and we have been surviving only on what was twice removed, in some sense, translated thoughts. In fact, for those of us who are here from linguistics, we have Harish Narang here. We have been teaching this, that even when we actually write original texts, that is also twice removed, because the deep of our thought process is something else. What comes out in the surface is something else. So I'm not surprised if a poet says, after a lifetime of creative writing, that what I always wanted to write I could never do. I've been only trying to write one poem. Where the consequence is bad of the orality coming into writing? Perhaps not, because we know from the ancient times that translations and retellings allowed us to travel. Where were we traveling? We were traveling between texts, between cultures, between communities, between time and space. The admixture has been so thorough and intense that it is now difficult to separate the endemic indigene from the external. So no surprise that by 1958, MNO had come up with the theory that India is a linguistic area. The thousands of years of commingling among so many languages have brought us closer to one another. Later, Peter Hook in the 80s had also suggested that India has emerged as a literary area. Look at the way our women in texts have been treated. Look at the way the downtrodden have been projected. So I had suggested that we are also slowly emerging as a translation area. So India, a linguistic area, a literary area, and a translation area, in spite of so many differences and divergences. There is another interesting point. From the classical to the modern period, our focus has been on self-defining. We are trying to define ourselves, our community, our culture, instead of our being defined in terms of an outsider's point of view. Not always waiting for an outsider to discover us, to discover Sanskrit from outside. We always think who we are, why we are here, where shall we go from here? I mean, all the people, Gautam Buddha, to Tirthankara Mahavira, Nanak, Sufi saints, to Swami Vivekananda, everybody had been asking the similar questions. Assuming that our sentences are cultural spaces, as authors and painters or as musicians, we learn early enough that we as subjects picture ourselves and our world as a set of natural objects. So as subjects, we then look at our natural objects and observe and measure, modify, or manipulate them. So when we self-define, we present or represent our time and space. Where our feelings take over, they become their own creative subjects, creating a very interesting dichotomy, the Surian dichotomy. So our task in creating our own myths, our texts and stories have been rooted largely in observing or commenting. So the commentary tradition, the Tikakaras tradition has been very important for India. So this is also kind of part of translating tradition. You are not only Patanjali commenting on Panini, he's not just translating Panini. In a way, he's also doing that, but he's elaborating on that by commenting, and he's trying to explain what is lying in sutras, in mathematical formulaic language. So when we put a figure or a mark on the canvas, we keep creating and recreating ourselves. So we are not surprised. When Ramanujan says that we have over 300 Ramayanas, or when somebody says we have so many Mahabharatas, we shouldn't be surprised that we have. So we are a translating culture. So I just give you an example of Tagore looking at himself on canvas. So this leads to the point of, is there something called cultural universal? When we are talking about global situation, global scenario, and our local scenario, some may claim that each culture is unique, each language, each literature is unique. But from the picture that I've painted so far, we could also infer that there are perhaps cultural universals, cultural typologies, parallel to language universals, language typology in the way Noam Chomsky or Joseph Grinberg or Bernard Comrie, they have us believe. So the second point is there must be universal ways in which one could define culture as a causative force, what causes some other events. And C, there must be ways to compare different cultures across. It is through these comparisons which emerge very clearly as we translate. If the world is becoming more and more free, it would have its reflections in our writings and thinking. This is also the reason why writers and translators are so concerned about what have been our progress in this direction. Now, are we really free in the world? Now, our ideas, for instance. We may have an idea of democracy. We may have an idea of freedom. We may have an idea of liberty. These are all cultural ideas. But are we so free? Let's look at it. Let's look at the world. Now, what I present you is a Freedom of the World 2020 from Freedom House. The legend is, the green is the free and the red is not free. So when we talk about very large portion of China, which is completely stifled expression of creativity, where obviously if you have a text which they're not very comfortable about, they won't allow you to translate into their language. So this freedom is completely missing there. It is also missing in some parts of Latin America, some parts of Africa. Otherwise, we have been progressing all right in terms of the freedom. If you look at the other cultural idea of democracy, which goes very closely with freedom, you would look at last 14 years of democratic decline. There are many gains. There are some countries which are being more and more democratic. From 2005 to 2019, you just look at it, we have had some gains, no doubt, but we have also had some declines. So it's like a swinging pendulum. The countries are going back and forth between the freedom and the bondage. And this is where our culture lies, and therefore this cultural context we should understand very well when we're talking in terms of translation. There are lots of walls. We can easily see that we are really walling our culture. The strength, what was our strength? The strength of the Oriental tradition in the South Asian subcontinent has been our acknowledgement that ideas and scholarship could come to us and who come to us from all over and from the remotest corner of our own peripheries. So we were never walled as a culture. Tagore observes about the Western culture in a very interesting manner, and I quote Tagore here. The civilization of ancient Greece was nurtured within city walls. In fact, all the modern civilizations have their cradles of brick and mortar. These walls leave their mark deep in the minds of men. They set up a principle of divide and rule in our mental outlook, which begets in us a habit of securing all our conquests by fortifying them and by separating them from one another. What did he say we divide? We divide nation and nation, knowledge and knowledge, man and nature. What does translation do? Translation is that liberating force that respects freedom but goes beyond it, creating new language and new idioms. So our goal, in a way, is freedom and liberty. It teaches us to be free, to be liberal. In Ideals of Education, Tagore talks about freedom of power, freedom of imagination, freedom of soul, and freedom of mind. All of this constitute freedom of moral communion in the human world. And these keywords are very crucial for our cultural achievements of knowledge and cultivation. These free-thinking endeavors that we have ingrained in our tradition. Now, I take you to another extreme by talking about freedom. I take you to between the lines, between the words, the silence in texts. Now, as translation theoreticians, we all know that these silences help us and hinder both. There are different ways we manipulate silence in our languages. Obviously, there are different ways English or German or French would manipulate silence in their texts. So it's not surprising that Wittgenstein, who in a way revolutionized language and philosophy, like Tagore, was concerned about this silence as an author-translator. Both of them were trying to discover the space between two words, two sentences, where there's only silence impregnated with meanings, just as between the lines rested many meanings. Wittgenstein's Tractus and philosophical investigations, they're all known to have often reverted to Tagore in this respect and appreciated later's use of silence in texts. Many common ideas, for instance, theory of numbers, discipline of mathematics and logic, that they fail to capture the essential aspect of man's creativity, man's attempt to break free of the boundedness of language. Because when a language gives you the boundedness as well as freedom. Chomsky says that, everybody says that, but how do you break that? That's the challenge for the language authors, that's the challenge for the language translators. Wittgenstein said, what we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence. Tagore, Aurobindo, all of them understood this. In fact, we are told that again and again Wittgenstein goes back to Tagore's King of Dark Chamber of his play called Raja, 1910 play called Raja. He says, please go and read that book, read the translation and the original, if possible. In the Vienna circle, whenever there was discussion and debate on philosophy, Wittgenstein would often start reading Tagore's poems. This influence of Tagore on Wittgenstein remained unexplored. I have given you some idea of those like Tullman or Raymond who tried exploring, but just wanted to emphasize on ancient Indian philosophy because this connects with the translation tradition or Tikakara or the commentary tradition of ancient India. Abraham Khan of University of Toronto, he briefly touched upon this relationship in a conference paper and tried to bring in the Sankhya school and says that the Sankhya philosophers use the concepts such as Purusha and Prakriti and their interaction, how they interact, the Jiva Purusha, in the way the boundedness and reaching over boundary is work with vis-a-vis languages. Now, recall that the kernel ideas of structuralism also circled around these areas, these concepts. The primary thrust was that human beings and all living entities differed in the way that human beings were able to cross the boundaries or the limits it encountered in both thought and expression, whereas others were bounded by that, were somehow constrained by that. Now, Kant differentiated between the notion of being human and becoming a person, where he carried with himself the idea of boundedness, of the potential for experiencing it. The texts translating the self. The idea that self is bounded finitely to the finite and infinitely to the infinite. This is a very interesting contradiction proposed by Kierkegaard. Would seem that otherwise to be contradictory proposition, but is important in our context. Tagore's description of the problem of self, you can easily see when he says, man's words are not a language at all. They are merely a vocal gesture of the dumb. The more vital his thoughts, the more have his words to be explained by the context of his life. And in the lecture series in USA called Sadhana, he added that those seeking the meaning would get only to the house, and they are stopped by the outside wall and find no entrance to the hall. At times, our texts go beyond meaning in projecting the self. We heard an echo of this when he wrote to Bertrand Russell in 1912, 13th October, where he says, quoting from Russell's writing, through knowledge, you cannot apprehend him. Yet when you live the life of the infinite, and are not bound by the limits of the finite self, you realize the great joy which is above all the pleasures and pains of our selfish life. So you are free from all fear. Now recall that Tagore was opposed to worship of the images of gods and goddesses. He was talking about one God, like the Islam does, like Christianity does, like many other people do. And he was talking about the Jivan Devata, the life God. So a very interesting way of looking at the relationship between the self and the sublimity. So what do we discover through translation? In the very significant and matured anthology of poems called Manasi, 1890, Tagore has a poem called Mauna Bhasha, the language of silence. Okay, it's not that Tagore started talking about silence only in 1910, 1912, 13. He had it in the 1890 volume, where he opened the poem with the statement, "Let it be as it is. Let there be no words from you. Let me just see and pass by as I hum a tune within and construct. Nobody knows how many pains, sorrows, and happiness." In original, he said, "Thak thak, কাজ নাই, বলিও না কোনো কথা, চেয়ে দেখি চলে যাই, মনে মনে গান গাই, মনে মনে রচি বসে, কত সুখ, কত ব্যথা." Later, in the same volume, Manasi, he asks this question, do you know of any speech that is soft, half-spoken, or one that comes out haltingly, as are halted by the tears that roll by, and is pale because of one's inherent shame and fear? এত মৃদু, এত আধো, অশ্রু জলে বাঁধো বাঁধো, শরমে সভয়ে ম্লান, এমন কি ভাষা আছে? How soft, incomplete, indecision choked with tears, how pale are the words, tied in shame and fear? What is poet's response to this? Tagore warns us, don't speak in words what has already been spoken by your eyes. Now, look at it in a way like Saussure. Tagore is also building up a whole semiotic enterprise by talking about culture and language and translation. what you can express through dance as a medium, what you can express through sketches and paintings, you need not speak. You did not say the same thing. Let longings within one's heart be free. What you can express through films. Many of us don't know that in 1930s a German company approached him to write screenplay of a film. He did write, but that is lost. But then he again wrote another screenplay and he also directed a film, short film. In fact, I tell my students that if he were alive for some more time, on the side margin of Satyajit Ray making his films, we would have seen Tagore also making films. Basically, he's saying that there are so many ways expressions can come up. Kathaye bolo na taha, akhi jaha boli ache. So it's a very important thing. Katha diye bolo jodi moho bhenge jaye pache. Because if you speak it up, if you try and translate that, maybe the moha that I have about the whole enterprise will be smashed. So the poet, translator, philosopher feels that he does not know himself so well to find expression for his feelings because he has not known or read himself. Ami to jani na more, dekhi nahi bhalo kore. I haven't seen myself well. I haven't understood myself well enough. So how do I express? Therefore, only you who might have seen all could compose a song in which perhaps there will be revelation of mind's words. Moner shakol bhasha, praner shakol asha, paro tumi gethe gethe, rochite madhur gite. I cannot do that. Maybe you can, as an author, as a translator. All that my mind could speak, all that my heart could hope, you are the only one who could read it into a lovely song. He then invites us to look above, to look beyond language. We could see that the entire sky filled with billions of silent stars, burning an extended language through their bodies to express themselves. He also invites all to sit silently and listen to the language of the universe. Pranpon, dirgho bhasha, jaliye phutite chai, esho chup kore shuni, pani stabdhota. If you do not want to understand silence, if you do not want to understand the gap between the two words, between two lines, what happens? If you do not pay this attention, what happens is shudhu katha upore katha, nishphal bakulata. Words pile upon words. They make man's worthless anxiety aggravated. Bujhite bujhate din chole jaye, betha theke jaye betha. While trying to explain in words, my days pass by, and the twinge remains, the pain remains. Interestingly, these metaphors of translation that Tagore uses in his writing have been also understood by an Egyptian poet called Muhammad Hesham. In 2008, Hesham is a faculty teaching literature in Helwan University, Cairo. He says in his blog post, the language of eternal silence, a reading of poems by Tagore. And he quotes Tagore writing in the 12th poem in translation, what language is thine, O sea? And the answer is the language of eternal question. What language is thy answer, O sky? And the answer is the language of eternal silence. Or one could see in Tagore's comments such as this, the dust of the dead words cling to thee, wash thy soul with silence. Interestingly, in a story in Golpogucho, as you know, he was the first short story writer in modern Indian creative writing tradition. He brought in, like a Bhagiratha, the genre of short stories from the West into our languages and started writing. 105 of them he wrote. He wrote a story called Shubha in 1893, and he uses these metaphors of translating and constructing words there. And I quote from him in translation. The feelings we express in words, we construct ourselves, almost like a translation. No, remember when I said that what we are thinking, we are twice removed when we are writing. A translation is also obviously a twice removal. The feelings we express in words, we construct ourselves, almost like a translation. The approximation is not always exact. Mistakes do occur, but eyes don't have to translate. The mind immediately casts a shadow over them. Feelings ebb and flow at ease. Sometimes the eyes sparkle. Sometimes they look faded. Sometimes they're listless. At times, like the setting moon, they gaze on all impassively. At other times, a glance bounces off objects like swift, glittering lightning. The language of the eyes of the one who cannot speak is limitless, benevolent and profound, somewhat like the clear sky, the site for an endless battle between dawn and dusk. So the question, and this is my last slide, is that does translation lead us to an unknown global world? Once again, I take you to Sadhana lecture series. In 1913, in Sadhana, Tagore had already argued the following. Man's history is the history of his journey to the unknown in quest of the realization of his immortal self, his soul. He went on to add about the journey human beings had to perform by saying, and I quote from him, through the rise and fall of empires, to the building up of gigantic piles of wealth and the ruthless scattering of them upon the dust, to the creation of vast bodies of symbols that give shape to his dreams and aspirations, and the casting of them away like the playthings of an outworn infancy, through his forging of magic keys with which to unlock the mysteries of creation, and through his throwing away of his labor of ages to go back to his workshop and work up afresh some new form. Yes, through it all, man is marching from epoch to epoch toward the full realization of his soul, the soul which is greater than the things man accumulates, the deeds he accomplishes, the theories he builds, the soul which onward course is never checked by death or dissolution. Thank you very much.
Neha ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Yahya sir. Thank you so much, Singh sir, for setting the right atmosphere for the deliberations on various aspects of translation and its relationship, gaps, silences, and its wonderful association with non-verbal language, as you have mentioned today, with a special reference to Tagore. We thank you so much for this insightful speech which you have delivered, and as I have mentioned that now the atmosphere has set where we will discuss about the different aspects of translation in coming few days. As we are reaching towards the end of the inaugural ceremony, a formal vote of thanks is mandatory, and to express our gratitude to all the stakeholders of the event, I invite my young and dynamic colleague, Dr. Basudha Roy.
Thank you, Neha ma'am. Thank you. And this has been one wonderful session, and we are extremely grateful to you on behalf of the Department of English, Kareem City College, for being a wonderful part of it. So to begin my vote of thanks formally, I would first like to express my deep gratitude to the Vice Chancellor of Fulhan University for consenting to be here with us today. He had some work and had to leave early, but he has left behind his best wishes and blessings for all of us. I would next request I would next call upon, my gratitude for our principal, Dr. Mohammad Riaz, for having supported this venture for the web conference entirely, sincerely, and he has allowed us the freedom, to get in touch with the people that we had so dreamed of having at this forum. And I would like to express my deep gratitude for Professor Udayana Singh for the wonderful keynote address that he delivered today. This has indeed, it has mesmerized us all. Sir, you've been incomplete. So thank you all for being with us, and we look forward to some wonderful sessions. Just as a reminder, we have a plenary session with Professor Sartevi, I believe, at 3 p.m. And then we look forward to our technical sessions further in the evening. We have a grand galaxy of speakers planned for the next 2 days, and we would love to have your support throughout. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Vasudhara, for the genuine expression of our gratitude to all those who are participating in different capacities here in this e-conference. And by this, we come to an end to this inaugural session. And thank you so much once again for being with us. As Vasudhara has mentioned, that you need to join us again in plenary session, which is scheduled at 3 p.m.
Thank you, Neha ma'am. Thank you, Uday sir. Thank you so much. As I said, it is a partial fulfillment of a desire. Now that all that formal vote of thanks is done, we have some persons or rather dignitaries who know Uday sir personally. The session is a bit open, and all those dignitaries like Anisur Rahman sir, Harish sir, if they wish to interact with Uday sir informally.
Yes, translation area. It has been a translation area. In fact, my thesis is that India is the best translation area. We are a multilingual nation. There is no other place in this universe where you can translate better, where you have the feel for translation the way we are doing, to evolve theories of translation, to think about translation, and to indulge into this practice. So I would say that this is nothing new that has happened here. In fact, we are the nation that have been translating for ages now. But at the same time, we still need to learn lots about translation. Many of our translations are not authentic. When you read any Western text, did you ever question that this translation is not worthy? And do you ever stop? Now, what is the technique evolving there, and what is the methodology that they've evolved? I'm not very sure about that. One needs to think. But many of our translations we question. Many of the translations, especially with reference to language, the way we have been using language. Of course, it's not the language that we speak, or we haven't lived with this language the way others have lived. So there are questions. But well, in India, we have to learn a lot about translation, and especially because as a language, the language that I'm speaking in, and we have been speaking throughout in the classroom and outside the classroom, from the malls to home, this language doesn't all the time serve the purpose. We falter, and we falter equally well in translation as well. So there is a scope for doing it in a better way, and this is endless, unceasing. So great pleasure joining the inaugural session, and I will be Nehaji. I must tell you, and Yahya Sahab and all the colleagues, that I'll be there all through. So don't think that I'm going away. I'm very much here. Thanks, Udayji. Thanks, wonderful talk. We haven't met for ages, it seems, but here I can see you. You have mellowed a little more than we met last year. And I don't know what has happened during the past 1 year, but you look a little more, say, I don't know, I don't want to say more, but wonderful seeing you on the screen today, and all other friends who have been here. Great, see you. And let this pandemic be over. We'll come to Jamshedpur. It seems it is a wonderful place to be in. One has heard about Karim City College a lot. This is for the first time that one is getting an exposure to colleagues in the Karim City College. Well, I have never been to your city, that is Steel City. I don't know why they call it a Steel City. It's not such a soft city. People look at the faces of the people, the smiling faces of the people here. It's a very soft city, not a steel city. Let that not come into our domain and our vocabulary. So wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Hi, Uday. It's a pleasure, as always, listening to you. And besides all that you have said, which is very significant, I have always admired the range of your reading and assimilating it for translation. The other thing that I really like is there are very few of us. Uh, I'm not one of those. You are. You are very much there. Who have really raised the flag for the dialects of India, which are so rich, and we need to build, as you made out the case, bridges between the various bhashas and the standard language, particularly with reference to Hindi, which has this Khadi Boli as a very hegemonic kind of language. And thanks very much for talking on behalf of other languages, which are languages but which have been reduced to, little brothers. Language like Maithili, for instance, we all know how much Maithili had to struggle to be recognized as the language in the 8th schedule, and also for being recognized for an award by the Sahitya Akademi and others. So I really enjoyed what you said. It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much, Karim City College and my colleagues for asking me to be a part of this wonderful event. I look forward to other presentations and others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mandeep sir.
Thank you,
Srini,
sir.
Yeah. So let me express my gratitude to Professor Singh. Professor Singh, this is Sunil Sinha. Hello, Professor Singh.
Yes, yes. Yes,
This
please.
is Sunil Sinha. You might know me. We met way back in 1992 when you were in CARES, Central University of Hyderabad. Yes, Sinha.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you don't remember me, right? Now, it was a wonderful lecture, and I must congratulate you for the work that you have done on translation. Now, it's just simply a clarification that I wanted to seek. Now, can a translated text be as great as the original? Now, let me elaborate my question. For the last 10 to 15 years, I've been asking this question to myself and to others. Why is it that in Indian writing in English, we have not been able to produce as great classics as, let us say, Godan or Gitanjali? What could be the reason? Now, listening to your talk today, if I may venture to say that writing in English, in fact, is translating. Are we really translating when we write in English as Indians? And maybe because we are translating, we are not able to express what we wanted to express, and that leads us to this concept of silence also. So I would like you to comment on this.
Well, I think personally that translations can be as great as the original, and there are many instances, not only in literature but also in the other media. Akira Kurosawa is as great as Shakespeare. We all know that. If you look at the way he has depicted a Shakespearean play in his films. So, or Tagore's Nostoni is as good as Satyajit Ray's Charulata. It's difficult to decide which one is better, which one is more appealing. So there are instances of that kind. But for a text translated into another language to become as good as the original, there are many factors which have to work in the background. Uh, Once those conditions are met, perhaps one can do that. But it is not a precise mathematical enterprise. It's something which is very creative. It all depends on how much the particular theme or the particular incident or the particular storyline has moved you to come up with a very meaningful transcreation or translation. Something like Kabuliwala by Tapan Sinha is so memorable today in everybody's mind. Or the 150 plus stage performances of Tagore's Post Office in so many languages of the world, Daghor, uh, which have really been remembered by people in Europe, everywhere. Uh, that is something which is somebody has to see what are those factors which will contribute to this kind of creativity. But you are right that translating from Indian languages into English uh, have not been as great as one would have expected with so much of exposure to English for several hundred years here. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for this wonderful lecture.
Dr. Neha, just may I join for a minute here?
Yes.
Dr. Neha, Sinha Saab, are you listening?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I just want to add, if you allow me, Neha ji, may I just add for a...
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to indicate a couple of points, make a reference to that. You made a reference to the Indian writing in English, that it seems that you seem to think that it hasn't been able to produce classics of the kind that you have from other languages, Indian languages. You quoted Tagore.
Yes, that's right. That is my question.
Starting from Henry de Rosio, that is poetry, and then Raj Mohan's wife, that is fiction. It's 150 years now, and that. And I think there have been quite a few remarkable pieces of writing that have come to us. Recently, we had a discussion in Sahitya Academy. We were trying to develop a catalog of the classics that we have been able to produce. And those of us who were involved in this kind of counting the heads and counting the titles, we came up with a number of titles of various kinds. They were not only from fiction, but also from poetry. I would not like to name here those things because in 150 years, the most interesting part is that our first poet, Henry de Rosio, was a major poet. So we began in a very major way. Similarly, our first fiction, that is Raj Mohan's wife, is a wonderful work. So the great story of Indian writing in English is that it begins with major works. That is one point. I won't like to name poets and their texts here because we don't have the time for this. The other point that you raised is also very interesting for me personally, in the sense that you spoke about the text written in a particular language and then its translation into another language. I'm reminded of one of my own papers which I did a long time back, which was published somewhere in a book, and also, of course, it was included in my book. I distinguish this act of translation into categories. I have to say that every act of communication is an act of translation. Every act, so to say. Whatever you speak, you do. Even animals who don't have a language that we understand, when the nai and the sai, you also have the translation. So from that point of view, when you write a text, this is the primary translation, as this is what I was trying to argue in that paper. But when you translate that text into another text, that is a secondary translation. So it goes on and on. The process of translation goes on endlessly from one language to another. Then, very closely associated with this is what we spoke there is this, that there is a dialogue that develops in this process of translation. And this dialogue is first developed by the author who has written it originally. That is, he develops a dialogue with the author, with the language in which he has written, with the age in which it was written, with the audience that is the target. And the same process is again repeated. It's again repeated. When it comes to me as a translator, I develop a dialogue with the author. I develop a dialogue with the language in which it was writing or is writing. I develop a dialogue with the culture and all kinds of things that. And finally, the language, and finally the target audience or the reader for whom I'm translating. So this process of dialogue and the dialogue development is so complicated. So now 16th century, Urdu poetry has to wait till I say about another 100 years for Wali to emerge. Then another 100 years for Mir Taqi Mir to emerge in 18th century. For another long time, we have to wait to emerge, to have Mirza Ghalib. 1869 he passes away, and then you have another poet Iqbal to emerge. Now, even if you look at English literary texts, how many texts do we have that we consider to be really canonical? I would count 5 or 6 poets we have, starting from Chaucer, how directly come down to Coleridge, who is who's a great voice of all times taken together. So if I look at texts from any language, whatever you have it, 10 poets, a dozen texts that you have from one language to another. So it's not to be counted in that way personally. Henry de Rosio was one kind of god. But then coming from Henry de Rosio, you have the Duck family album at the same time. I'm not saying that they were major poets or great poets, but they made a great contribution. So literary history emerges in this manner. It doesn't emerge in the sense that these are the main poets, these are the focus people on whom you have to concentrate. You go on. And when you go on, actually you pick poet. So everyone can't be a Ramdhari Singhankar or a Tagore as you say, or a Ghalib as you say. Mir is still very much prevalent. When I read Mir, when you read Mir, you have I don't know where to stop and where to start Mir, because it's very difficult to absorb Mir and to be able to understand Mir the way one should probably understand, because this gentleman has written so much that one can't even read all that he has written. So these are all very interesting and also at the same time very complicated questions. And Asab, I don't know if I've been able to, but this I just thought that I should respond to what you were saying. Thank you.
Yeah, these are very complicated questions. Right. We can discuss it later on. Probably
Of course,
we are
yes.
speeding into their time. So,
Yeah.
okay, thank you very much.
But I think definitely, sir, the convener of the e-conference is very happy because the kind of, deliberations and discourse and discussions have been started. So I think this shows the success of the topic, and your presence is making it quite interesting and insightful. And all the discussions, whatever will happen, across respected dignitaries, we as the participants are going to benefit it, from this kind of discussion, definitely. So we look forward for your responses and your insight into every session which we are going to have in the day which has started today. And as Rahman has already mentioned, that it's 3 days. The day 1 we are actually running through, and then another 2 days will be full of discussions and discourses. Thank you so much for joining in. Uday sir, especially to you as the keynote speaker. Sir, good day. And again, I believe that we will be able to see you around 3 p.m. For the next plenary session. Rahman sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Naresh sir. आपको याद रहा, that is the good thing.
Hello. Good afternoon, Yaya sir.
Good
Good
afternoon,
afternoon,
dear
dear
sir.
sir.
Thank you. Okay, okay.
Good afternoon, Nadesh sir.
Good
Good
afternoon,
afternoon,
Ashok
Ashok
Babu.
Babu.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Ehiyat,
Ehiyat,
Nihad,
Nihad,
Basu.
Basu, all.
Good
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 afternoon,
afternoon,
sir.
afternoon.
sir.
Good afternoon,
Afternoon,
Naresh.
Naresh.
Good
Good
afternoon, all
afternoon,
of
all of
you.
you.
Good to
Good to
see
see
Anis sir
Anis sir
here.
here.
Good
Good
afternoon,
afternoon,
sir.
sir. Yes. Uh,
Who is the
Who is the
speaker in
speaker
the
in the
session?
session?
Deha,
Neha,
who is
who is
going to
going to
speak in
speak
this
in this
session?
session?
Sir,
sir,
Nizar
Nizar
Sartavi,
Sartavi,
sir,
sir,
he will
he
be
will be
joining from
joining from
Jordan.
Jordan.
Oh.
Oh,
Has he
has he
joined?
joined?
I
I
don't see
don't
him
see
right
him right
now.
now.
So I
So
think
I
we are
think we are
waiting for
waiting
him
for him
to join.
to join.
But we
But
had
we
a
had
very
a
good
very good
beginning
beginning
today.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
I was
listening to
listening
Uday
to
sir
Uday
for the
sir for the
first time in
first
my
time in my
life.
life.
Okay.
Okay.
I had
I had
not
not
heard him
heard him
earlier.
earlier.
Sakit,
Sakit,
is our
is our
guest
guest
here?
here?
Can you
Can you
check?
check?
No, sir,
No,
I
sir, I
cannot see
cannot
him.
see
I
him.
think
I
he's
think
not
he's
yet
not
here.
yet here.
Okay.
Okay.
Nizar sir,
Nizar
if you
sir, if you
can
can
listen to
listen
us
to
if
us
you are
if you are
here
here
with some
with some
another
another
ID.
ID.
Nizar
Nizar
sir.
sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Saket, he's not here, no?
No, sir, he's not here.
I have just messaged him through social media, but I don't know whether he can see it or not. Keep an eye as soon as he joins. We'll begin.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Dear participants, we are waiting for the speaker to join. He is yet to join. We don't have any contact number of him, but I am in contact with him on social media. So I'm trying to contact him a few minutes before he was there online. So I'm trying. Sorry for the inconvenience. Hello, dear participants. Meanwhile, we are still waiting for our guest to join, but we can't keep you waiting in such a manner. So, meanwhile, we have decided that the time till the time if he joins well and good, we will begin with his lecture. But till the time he joins, let us have a discussion on translation in media. We have a few persons here who are associated with media somehow, whether it is cinema or it is television. And let us look at that how a literary text is translated through the celluloid. So that is a sort of a small discussion that we are beginning. We have with us Professor Anisur Rahman sir, Dr. Vijay Sharma ma'am, who has a lot of experience of writing about cinema and translation and several other things. We also have our head of the mass communication department of our own college, Dr. Neha Tiwari. We have with us Dr. Sanjay Yadav sir. Maybe that I'm missing some more names. So let us start and begin a discussion on that how we translate and how this job of translation is being done in our media, whether it is film or television. I would like to request Vijay Sharma ma'am to just initiate the discussion, and then all of us, the rest of us, will try to join. Dr. Vijay Sharma ma'am.
Okay, it is a surprise. Good afternoon to everybody.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Actually, without preparation, I'm here. But when we talked about cinema and translation, or translation and cinema, usually these two are different entity. But usually literature is translated on the screen. It is a very risky affair. And whenever literature is translated on the screen, two things, as I can immediately think, can happen. People who have read the literature part already, and if they see the same thing on the screen, immediate reaction will be there. Some people will say it should not be done. Some people will say it is not done properly. Or some others will say, yeah, very well done. So you will find different kinds of opinion when literature is translated or a text is translated in the form of screen. And when this is done, even the writers, hardly they are happy. Seldom they feel that my work is translated very well on the screen. At the same time, this risk is taken by different directors, film directors. They do take literature, they take it on the screen. So people who have seen, or people who have already read the literature part, usually they are not happy with the screen part. This happens because literature gives you ample opportunity for imagination. When you read something in the print, immediately your mind imagines those things. So you can have one kind of imagination, and suppose 100 people are reading simultaneously that work, 100 kinds of imagination will be there. So you are free to imagine what a writer has given in the print form. But the moment it comes on the screen, it is restricted. We see what we see what director wants us to see. So our imagination immediately is restricted by the director's vision or director's imagination. And because these two are so different from each other, literature and film, so many things which can be read in the form of letters, you cannot translate them into the language of film because these two have totally different grammar. It seldom happens that the text is as it is we see on the screen. Even in the great so-called great directors, take example of Satyajit Ray. When he translated, he mostly took other people's story, and so many times he has his own story to film. But when he took Premchand's story, Sadgati he took, or he took Shatranj Ke Khiladi, lots of criticism was there. Because he showed those content in the form of film, which he was expert. So he has shown his things in his light, in his vision, in his imagination. So naturally, as a film, if you see, those things are superb, they are very good. But if you try to compare, you will find that they are not same thing. As I said, if audience has seen, audience has read the literature part, they will have this kind of reaction. No, it is not what I read most of the times. But there are films, they surpass the literature. It has happened, but it is very rare. If a reader has read the thing and if he sees the same thing on the screen, our critics, sometimes they feel, yes, film has surpassed the literature part, but that is very rare thing. Usually, more criticism is there because these two have totally different grammar. Literature has its own language and film has its own language. When we talk about film, the language of film, it is not sentences, it is not dialogue, it is not paragraphs which we have in the literature form. Language of cinema is totally different. So when you translate literature into film, naturally whole thing changes. I can keep on speaking, but that should not be there. So to know these two things, literature and cinema, which we are saying it is translation on the screen, these two are totally different things. We have to know the grammar of both. We have to know the language of both. Most of the people, because we are reader, people who are already familiar with the literature, they know the grammar of literature. But very few people know the grammar of film. Because we do see film. Even the people who cannot read or write, they can see the film, they can enjoy the film. But hardly they can understand the film. Because they don't know the grammar of the film. They don't know the language of the film. So, to say whether translation is done properly or not, first we have to train ourselves in the language of the film. We know the language of the literature, but if we want to compare whether translation has been done well or not well, we have to first familiar with ourselves, familiar with the language or the grammar of the film. So this is very important as I understand. translation can be done, literature can be translated into film, but or it is good or not, we have to first train ourselves in the language of film. This is what I want to say. Let others say what they are feeling. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing some important things out here. I would like to request Neha ma'am to introduce the discussion. Neha ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Vijay Sharma ma'am, for initiating this course on cinema. Yeah, my camera takes time to open, so maybe in between it will start, but till it begins, I'll start my conversation. I'm agreeing that most of the time it happens that there is a criticism when it comes to adaptation, but we need to, yeah. But this problem arises because most of the time people do not understand that actually we are talking about two different media, which are entirely different in nature. If we, as you're saying that cinema has completely different language, and I'm totally agree to it, because in literature, if we have language, if we have letters and words, cinema has camera, which literature lacks, and the camera has capacity to bring out imagination and create a certain kind of reality, and to fix the imagination. Because of the camera, we have a different strategy to depict, to describe our emotions, and that's why the difference arises, and the directors take entirely different approach. And as you were referring to Satyajit Ray himself has said that nobody can take up or adapt literature directly, into cinema. So director has to decide that what is cinematic. When someone is reading something and someone is trying to watch anything, so it's an entirely different sensory experience. So if the director has decided to adapt any text into or convert into cinema, then he has to understand that he has to choose, or he should choose, what is cinematic in nature. So what I mean by cinematic is, or what Satyajit Ray mean by cinematic is that which will be visually appealing, which can be shown through camera, and which can give actually the nuances of the internal emotions, internal conflicts which are there in human mind, after reading the text. So it's very difficult actually, because in literature we have time, we have space, and we can describe so many things in different paragraphs. There is no constraint of time, because you can write 500 word story, and you can take 5,000 words. It's all up to you. It's your choice. But when you are making cinema, it becomes difficult, because you have 3 hours in hand, and you will be surprised to know that when Satyajit Ray was translating Parthiv Panchali, and when he thought about Aparajito, he has just skipped one portion of the novel, because he thought that if he will enter into this aspect of the novel, then it will take lots of time and energy, or maybe deviate the character of the protagonist. So this is the take, very strong take, and for that, a lot of criticism he got into, but he accepted, and he challenged people and said that if one has to adapt a text, it will be a liberty of director, because it's director's interpretation of the text. So we need to think it as the reader's response to a particular text. And as far as translation in cinema or is concerned, we also need to include about subtitling. because of the OTT platform and globalization and now this pandemic, we all are actually enjoying all kind of cinema, whether it's being produced in Belgium or in Hungary, or Hong Kong cinema is becoming very popular these days, Korean cinema. So we all are enjoying different kind of cinema these days, and that's all courtesy Netflix and Amazon. And within India, South Indian cinema is being so much subtitled for us, so that we can enjoy their cinema also. So this subtitling is also comes under the translation. And when it comes to subtitling, again there are so many challenges, because it's very difficult to translate which are there in our cinema as the cultural nuances. Like for we have the reference of Hanumanji. Now if you have to translate it into English, how you are going to translate it? So sometimes I have seen that people have written monkey like God. Okay, so it's very difficult to make person understand who doesn't belong to your culture, that what actually this monkey like God can mean, and what Hanumanji is to Indian culture. So that sometimes becomes a huge problem when you are translating, trying to translate culture. But subtitle has this requirement, so people take this challenge. And again, when we are trying to translate, and doing subtitling, the temporal and spatial, these two things become again important, because you have certain frame, and frame is there in front of you for a specific time. And you have to write the entire dialogue, within that time and within that frame. So again, there is a restriction. So you have to, and you cannot take up the subtitling to half of the screen. So you have maybe one line or two lines, and then you have to translate in such manner that whatever is there in the frame or in that space, in that particular shot, it should come, and at the same time, you retain the integrity of the dialogue and the substance of the dialogue into subtitling. So that again becomes a huge problem. And then, of course, the style, because what is happening, we need to understand that if we are watching cinema, there are different dialogues. And someone is speaking, and in speaking, what happens that what is the pitch, tone, everything decides so many things. So there is something into one is saying, and how one is saying is also equally important. But that if you have to convert it into written medium, then it becomes a problem, because then you cannot get that force, that emotion, which is there hidden in the tone and pitch and your throw and volume of something. So again, it's a huge problem. Then if you take the example of India, we have different class, we have rural or rustic dialogues, and we have urban people. They speak differently. So, but when you are trying to translate it into subtitles, you cannot find that kind of division most of the time. So if you are translating, maybe someone has a different kind of style of speaking in a rustic form if someone is saying, and in an urban form someone is saying. But if you are translating it, you have to be you may tend to translate in a similar manner. So that nuances are missing when you are doing the translation for the cinema, and trying to put your effort into subtitle translation. So that was another aspect of translation, and I think whatever I wanted to speak regarding this subtitling translation and all, I have given my version, and now I invite Rahman sir, because he is here and senior most. If he will throw some light on this topic, it would be very nice. Rahman sir, please.
Can you listen? Is my voice audible?
Yeah.
There is a message from the plenary speaker. I'm just reading it out. Dear Dr. Yahya, right now I am in a mess. There is an urgent meeting of Jordanian Writers Association. Something untoward has come up. something, the board is about to break. I have to join the meeting, and then I'll talk to you later. So this is a message that we have received. Sorry for the month of you.
Yeah. So I think he won't be able to join us, or maybe he will join us very
He
soon.
will not join us today. He says that I will not join tomorrow today. If possible, I can join tomorrow.
Okay.
So
So,
basically, with the hard time.
okay. So yes, sir. I think our Prime Minister has given us slogan "Apada mein Avsar." Okay, so I take it as Avsar only, and we are happy. We are fortunate that we have Anish Rahman sir with us, and and he who himself has worked so much on translation and from Urdu to English, and it will be a blessing. That we will be able to listen to him for another half an hour or so. Sir, I request you to take the charge of this virtual forum and enlighten us about the translation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Information that Anish sir is associated with Resta also, and Resta is also bringing a lot of film personalities in the discussion of Urdu language in the future. So I hope you have a lot of experience with interacting with the cinema people and Resta. That will come out of this. Welcome.
Yes. Sir, we are giving you open forum. You can talk about cinema and translation, and you can talk about anything related with translation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Neha and Vijaya ji and Yahya Sahab. You said half an hour, Neha. That is a tall order. Especially because I'm not one who has worked in this area of filmic text and the literary text. As being a student of the both, but not a critic, the way you have presented the material that you had in mind is so very well laid out. You know the outcome, because the earlier speaker also spoke about the grammar of the two, that is the literary text and the filmic text. Well, I have some stray thoughts that I'd like to share with you. That first is that when you talk of the filmic text and the literary text, you are having two texts in hand entirely. Now, the literary text, once translated from one language into another, has a certain kind of readership, which the translator knows, and which the translator later discovers that this was not the area that I was expecting someone will come and read. But then he discovers later that he has been able to find a new area of readership. For example, when Vaikom Muhammad Bashir was writing, no one in this part of this country was at all aware of what Bashir was trying to convey. But once the translations of Bashir started in various Indian languages, especially after he came into focus, we came to know of the dreams and the aspirations of the kind of people that he was engaging with and the experiences that he was trying to project. So that is one kind of a situation where you have. But if you try to translate that story of Vaikom Muhammad Bashir, pick any story or pick any kind of a situation in which he places himself, that becomes a different kind of a text. But I'm trying to say that the receivers of both the texts are very different. The receiver of a literary text is not the receiver of the filmic text. The receiver of a literary text is a very critical receiver. That is why we have a huge amount of scholarship already available as far as literary translation is concerned. But probably, I'm not very sure, but probably that amount of scholarship is not available when you talk of the filmic text and the translation of a literary text, for example, Wuthering Heights. If I'm not wrong, this is Dil Daya Dardiya, which had Dilip Kumar and other characters, or for example, Passage to India, or for example, Hamlet, or many Shakespeare plays have been translated. So the receivers, the readers, or the viewers of both these texts are different kinds of viewers. If as a student of literature I am looking at Hamlet, I may not find the similarities that Hamlet or Othello had, and which we have studied as a literary text in the classroom or otherwise. But if you are trying to translate it as a literature for the reader, then the reader would be very critical in looking at our translations and will find a new discourse being set, a new discourse being thrown out to the people. But most of the viewers, when you go to a theater to watch a film, you come back happy that you had a story, you had some very interesting characters, you had a situation. You never look back at the situation from where has this text come into being. How this text has been translated, because many of would not know at all who the original author of this translation, of this literary text was. So he doesn't interrogate. A literary translator is interrogated more often than a filmic text translator is interrogated. That is one very interesting and very important say, distinction that we need to make. The other point that we also need to keep in mind, that comes to my mind often when I think of this area, is this: that create a literary text, and when that text is translated, then it is in the hand of one translator who has done it. Now the same text might go to another translator, and he can translate it in a different way. It can go to several translators thereafter. So one text can go to several translators, fine. But when it comes to translating the text into a filmic text, the translators are too many. Starting from cameraman to actor to director and to producer even. Sometimes even the producer pushes his nose to say that this is what reflects upon how he reflects the whole, say, the spirit of the story. So my point is that in a filmic text, the translators are too many. But in a literary text, there is one translator at one time. But there is a difference here as well. Say, for example, if I translate a text, so I just don't verbally do some verbal exercise in translating with a dictionary by the side and a thesaurus on the other side. But there is something much more involved into it. As I was mentioning a little someday to someone, that translation is essentially an activity of dialogue. You develop a dialogue. And the dialogue that you develop in a literary text has so many levels. The first dialogue is developed by the author who wrote that text, and he develops that dialogue with himself before he starts writing a text. He develops a dialogue with the language in which he is writing. He develops a dialogue with the tradition to which he belongs. So the whole history and geography, the archaeology and the architectonics of the text is he is going to formulate. But when it comes to the filmic text, when it's going to be translated into a film, the situation gets entirely different. So what they do, that both are trying to do some kind of image making. So the translator of a literary text does create an image of a text, which might vary or which might be different from the image which is in another place being done by someone else. So that difference of image making is there. And this image making is of one type in one text, and it's another type in a filmic text. But this might again vary. There are examples, many examples of the same story, of the same novel being filmed too many times. There is another problem yet to this, that is, you sometimes have, for example, on our TV, Netflix these days, or otherwise also, you have some films where you do not have the language which you understand. Therefore, there are translations of that. Now, if you look at those translations, they're different kinds of translations, entirely different. They are made to order in a sense that the viewer will have to catch it immediately, because the scene will pass. It will not stay for long. So it has to be more idiomatic, it has to be more direct, it has to be more emotional appeal. It's trying to pat on your back, trying to raise your emotions so that you arouse and you just respond to it in a different manner, as the director would expect. So both are trying to make images, but the images will ultimately will appear in different ways, because the stakeholders in both the image making are different kind of stakeholders. The producer, as I said, and the picture, and the cameraman, as the director, and anyone else. And now all of them together trying to put a film together, which is going to the millions. Millions of people are going to watch this. So they are trying to play safe in the sense that they have to sell. Essentially, the film is there to sell. No one makes a film just for kind of archival material. Some people do make that film also, because they don't bother about the Godhuli. Not many people might have seen, but Godhuli is a wonderful filmic text that one has to look at. So the audience, the target audience, the techniques would definitely differ. Then comes the question of interpretation. Now, interpretation does take place. Interpretation, however much you try that I'm not interpreting, you somehow interpret the text if you are going to translate as a literary text. And the same interpretation also takes place in a filmic text, because you never know that your interpretation is going to tally with it. Therefore, a passage to India comes to us when it is translated into a film. The passage to India comes to us in two different ways. It doesn't come. It's very difficult. It is extremely difficult to portray that situation in the cave with Adela Question and Dr. Aziz. How do you bring it out in a filmic text and in a literary text? Suppose Wuthering Heights is translated into Urdu, into Hindi, into Bangla, into Oriya. There's a possibility of doing that. But trying to understand that very mystical experience between Dr. Aziz and Adela Question and that cave scene. Now, it all depends on how you are going to interpret that situation. Is the motive sexual? Is the motive something different? Or very, very mystical that one is not able to lay one's hands upon? Something very strange that is not indefined. That's completely indefined. So these are very difficult, very tough moments for any kind of a translator, whether literary translator or a filmic translator. So interpretation is, of course, at both the levels that works. Now, at say translation in both the places is, to me, it appears that it is a kind of changing the order.
नेट तो कनेक्ट है, ये इसी में क्लिक करें ना, रीच।
Translation or literary translation. We need to take the messages. We have to take the messages that is coming across. If we take that message, what is the reader expecting from me, and what is the viewer is expecting from me? Maybe in a position we are in a position that we might improve ourselves. Aqib is here. I would like Aqib, if at all. Aqib, are you listening to me? Aqib, would you like to make some contribution to this? It's a freewheeling discussion.
Rahman sir, there is some disturbance in your audio. Your voice was cracking last 2 minutes.
I see. Now, I just said that there's an open forum and very interesting ideas are coming up. I can see Aqib Sabir here. If you can hear, Aqib, would you like to say a few words, because this is an area which also interests you, I think.
Okay. As Yahya sir and Rahman sir are mentioning that this is the open forum. If anyone is interested in participating in this discussion, they can unmute and they can discuss.
Something as sir is saying that you are aware about all the situations happening. Your comment here.
He can't unmute.
Okay. There is an icon instead of you, so is there any technical problem to me? Okay. That means unable to unmute.
Anyone might join. There is no issue. Anyone might join because it's turning out very interesting, and one can button, one can just pitch in.
I think Sanjay sir is around and willing to say something. Sanjay sir?
Yeah. That was quite an interesting take by Rahman sir. And I have read the book which he has written on new literatures. It has been a good aid to my students because we have introduced new literatures recently in our university, say for last 4 or 5 years. So it's great to see you on screen here, sir.
Oh my God.
And yeah, and
It's very old
I would.
one. It's an old
Yeah,
book
I
now.
know, I know
But
it's an old
yeah,
one,
it
but
has seen some
it's
help.
it's
Yes.
it's it's pretty valuable for all of us, for teachers, for students. I largely subscribe to that, and I hope that you write a few more in future to ease our path.
There is one which has come recently, which has come because this is a conference on translation. Last year, Orion Black Swan published a book of mine called In Translation. That might be of interest to some of you. That is called In
Nice.
Translation, done by Orion Black Swan. Yes, please carry on, Yadav.
Yeah, coming to your point on the passage to India, the adaptation of passage to India into a movie. I have seen that movie several times. Well, as far as the relationship between Adela Quest and Dr. Aziz is concerned, that remains quite mysterious in the literary text itself. So leaving that apart, I personally feel that the adaptation into the movie of that particular novel is 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 top notch. I would say. I don't know how the author reacted to the adaptation when it was turned into a movie, because we all know that Arkin Narayan was never happy with the adaptation of the guide into the movie. The guide was made separately for the American audience and separately for the Hindi audiences. But I think that was as far as Passage to India is concerned, I think it is one of the better adaptations. And there are situations. I was attending a program in Ranchi, and a professor of ours, Dr. D.P. Sinha, he was into playwriting for radios, and he talked about the intricacies which the stage faces sometimes. For example, he was saying that there was a dialogue like Sita ji patthar ki murti bani baiti thi. So it's easy to insert into the script of a play, but it's very difficult to show that scene on the stage. So he said that it's very difficult for the director to show Sita ji, sitting like a stone or stone-faced, benumbed, those kind of a thing. So yes, Dr. Vijaya talked about how literary texts can fire a reader's imagination in their own ways. But we have seen the power of visual medium as well, especially the movies like Jurassic Park, and also the movies, recently made movies like Bahubali Part 1, Part 2. They have done wonders to the imagination of the readers or the audience. So visual medium is generally perceived to be a hindrance to readers' imagination. But with the help of animation, this can be taken further. Coming to the value of subtitles, I think they are just invaluable. Because when I first started watching Hollywood movies, it was difficult for me to follow the dialogue. When we look at them, they're the English idioms which they follow are slightly different. Their slangs are different. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Yes, you are
Thank
audible.
you. Yeah, thank you, sir. So that helped me a lot to pick up the accent and to thoroughly understand the English movies. Now it's much easier. Similarly, you watch Australian English movies. It's not easy to pick up their accent, but if the subtitles are there, that helps you a lot. Well, there is another type of translation going on. When we see Hollywood movies being translated into South Indian movies and into South Indian languages, and with all due respect to the South Indians here, I mean for us the North Indians, that creates a funny effect, because we all know that the story is English, the characters are all English looking, but when we see them or when we hear the dialogues dubbed into Malayali or Telugu or other languages, so that creates a funny effect. But anyways, I think both the mediums, be the printed, the print medium or the visual medium, they have their own attraction and their own limitations. This is all I had to say on this issue.
Aapit Sabe sir, are you in a position now to unmute your mic? Aapit Sabe sir, are you in a position now to unmute your mic?
Yeah, hello. Am I audible?
Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
Yes, I have a few points to make regarding this. For example, we have been talking about literary text and say cinematic text, if you speak in terms of pictures. Now, when we let us first talk about the particular instances when the poet or the writer is focused on creating images in the text. When, for example, take we can say Gulzar, or in Urdu poetry there is a genre of manzar kashi, when there are a lot of images put into the poem or the text. Similarly, Wordsworth writing about the sublime and other things. So that's then they are trying to put images into the text. So we are saying pictures are being translated into text, that too in the mind of the poet or the writer itself. On the other hand, when we saw that particularly in the 20th century and then onwards, the books were published, when the poems, when they were published in the books, they were given a particular kind of arrangement, the sentences were given a particular kind of arrangement, so that there was not just literature there was also some sort of visual imagery to the presentation part. So there is a regular exchange of language and image, or we can say speech and pictures happening either in the mind of the poet, also in say books, in presentation. Similarly, when we are talking about subtitling the cinema or subtitling the other movies, etc. So then again, there is an exchange of language and image. So can we really distinguish between text and picture as two different media of communication, whether in terms of say creative writing or critical writing? Because I think that whenever we are speaking, also the new theories about language and metaphor, which say that which outline the fact that we are regularly creating images in our head, and we are talking or say we are transmitting elaboration, some sort of to dismiss this boundary between speech and picture, because ultimately they are both symbols. So basically we are referring through either picture or through words to some other thing. So the translation is not really limited to literature or text being translated into cinema, or cinema being translated to a say screenplay, because I think that this is happening all the time. Like right now, even when we are talking, or we suppose we are narrating some event from the past, then there are images, images are revolving around in our heads, and we are trying to convert that into speech, into language. So this kind of exchange, this kind of contact between language and picture, like Benjamin Franklin, I suppose, he points out in the essay Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, that camera only gives you, it helps you see what the naked eye cannot see. So maybe camera is only enlightening, or maybe camera is only, sharpening the contours of what we are talking about. But it's not really, there's not really much of the difference between picture and words. They are both just symbols, and translation should transgress the boundaries of these two things as different media. They are not different media. They are the same media, but we they point to something that is perhaps not accessible either to the to language or to pictures. That's what I had to add. And if anyone could please illustrate this more or critique it.
Thank you, Aqib bhai. I think that Vijaya ma'am wanted to say something. She wanted to add something more. Vijaya ma'am.
Actually, I just wanted to say about what Mr. Sanjay Yadav sir said. He said that literature flares of our imagination, and cinema, as I said, cinema, when we talk about cinema, it restricts our imagination. I'm trying to.
Yeah, ma'am, please.
So please. Actually, I was saying when it is converted into cinema or translated into cinema, their pictures are fixed. When we read about Akbar, we can imagine so many things about Akbar. But once it is translated into the film, when we see Mughal-e-Azam, now whenever we think about Akbar, same image will come into our mind if we have seen the film. So there I am trying to say that cinema restricts our imagination. It becomes a stereotype. Every time we think about Akbar, same feature will come into our mind, the audience mind. This is what I was trying to say. Cinema, of course, gives lots of scope for imagination, but it also restricts the literature part when it is converted into cinema. So that, in that sense, I was trying to say about the imagination part. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. As we have to start the technical session at half an hour after this. So I now request Anis sir just to conclude the session, and then we'll wrap up for today. I mean the technique in this session.
Thank you. Thank you, Yahya sir. Sometimes when you start things in a casual manner, in the sense that we have started right now, we were not prepared for the session, and yet we did a good job, I understand. It so happens that when you are very well prepared, it's happened with me many a time that when I was very well prepared for my class, I didn't do very well. And when I was not prepared for the class, I did pretty well. So this session is of that kind where we are not prepared for what we are doing right now. But the input that we have had from four of us, three and then four, I think, has added to personally my understanding of what a literary text is and what a cinematic text is, and what is the mechanics involved in translating these two texts into different kinds of medium. It's a situation when I really wonder that is there any moment in life, I often wonder if there is any moment in life when one doesn't really learn. This session more particularly, I would say, is a learning experience for all of us who are participating here. Well, all of us watch a movie, but we never do it as critically as we do when we read a text, because this is what engages our attention more closely. When we go to a movie, we often are in a situation that we are going to enjoy that moment of 2.5 hours, that we are going to enjoy that moment. Unless you are very critically looking at that film and you are trying to understand the whole say the mechanics into the making of that film as a critic, as a film critic or otherwise, then that is a different preoccupation. But when you go to a movie, you are not prepared that way, that you are going to be critically looking at that movie, about the acting, about the photography, about the dialogue delivery, about the dialogues, about the lyrics. Now, most of this these days, I mean, the current scenario as we have today, the films that are being made, look at the lyrics, for example. The lyrics are such that they don't stay in your mind for long at all. But go back to the 60s, why is it called the golden age of Indian cinema? And Bombay cinema, that used to be called earlier, which is called Hindi cinema. And in fact, in one of my papers, I did interrogate this, what is this Hindi cinema and what is this Bollywood? Are we so much impressed by Hollywood that we can't give another name to our films that are being produced in Mumbai? We still call it Bollywood. And when I was writing this paper of mine, it was a research paper which appeared recently in a book. I did engage with this idea, what is this Bollywood? And believe me, there is not a single person who has not used Bollywood. Even those, I'm talking of those persons who are critics, who are film critics, who are very important people in the media, who have studied film, who have taught film, they invariably call it Bollywood. I have a very serious question here. Why to call it a Bollywood? You have a Tollywood, I understand, but even that is inspired by some kind of a Bollywood which is somewhere else. So our Calcutta film is also called Tollywood. So these are similarly Hindi cinema. Now, what is Hindi that we understand these days? Well, this what we call as Urdu. Urdu and Hindi come very close. In fact, in the beginnings, that is in the 16th century, and when this Rekhta word was used for this language that we are speaking today, it's a different kind of Rekhta that we speak today. So even during those days, the language that we were using, which was under a constant state of constant transformation, day in and day out, starting from Khusro, someone tells me it starts from Buddha, which is historically correct. But when you come down to the development of a language, then naturally situation turns out very difficult. You have to critically look at it. So when you go to a movie, you don't look at these aspects. So I was talking of the lyrics. Now look at the lyrics being written today. They're momentary lyrics. And it is the music that saves that lyric. This is my personal opinion. There is nothing in the lyric that the person who has written it knows anything about. He has just to immediately click, that it clicks, it hits your imagination, you sing for a while, hum. You don't even hum it for a longer time, more than a day. The situation is this, that the lyricist today doesn't know what is a lyric. He doesn't know what is a line length. He doesn't know what is a musical line. He doesn't know how a song is written. And most of them don't even know the kind of language, either Hindi or Urdu. I have seen their scripts, which is in Roman. अंग्रेजी में लिखते हैं वो, हिंदी की भाषा होती है, अंग्रेजी में लिखते हैं, उर्दू होती है, हिंदी में लिखते हैं. So this is very interesting kind of a scenario. It is pathetic as well as, I don't know which is the other word to use. It is pathetic. I know some Urdu poets, for that matter, thinking of the lyricists in the film. I have known some Urdu poets who are good poets, but they don't know Urdu at all. And I happen to see some of their writings, उनकी बयास जो होती है जिसमें वो नज़्में लिखते हैं और ग़ज़ल लिखते हैं. I happened to look at it and it was all in Devanagari. I have no complaints. You just go ahead with that. But then you are writing in a language which you should be knowing. Similarly, if you are writing a lyric, you should be knowing what a lyric is. Now, many of these lyricists do not know what is kafiya, what is radif, what is bahr, what is line length, what is music, there is an internal rhythm in the song that you have. So it's a very tragic kind of a situation. And you earn the highest amount of money from these films these days. So what kind of a translation is this film now? What does it translate finally? What is it? So it is translating into money, which goes into the pocket of the producer and the director, and part of it into the pocket of the actors and who have contributed to it. So it's a very business-like proposition. And it is something which really engages the attention of the intellectuals and the critics. Why call it a Bollywood film? Why call it a Hindi film or an Urdu film? There is nothing, it is an argot that we are speaking today. A-R-G-O-T is the word which I used for this kind of language, and a colleague of mine asked me why you are using this word argot. I said it is argot. It's no language, it's a different kind of a language. I remember a film, I don't remember the title of that film, what's the name? There are 6-7 young men who are from different classes and who speak different kinds of languages. One of them speaks Sanskritized Hindi. So it's a very fine kind of a framework that the picture presents there. It's typical Indian reality. Young boys, how do they respond to life, and how they negotiate with life as such, day in and day out. And one of the characters, which is Nasiruddin Shah's son, I'm forgetting the name of that young man, very talented actor. So he was one of the actors there, and he was speaking that particular kind of language, which is very difficult to communicate with. So situation is very dynamic. Nothing stays today for a long. In the 60s or maybe in the 50s, 60s, 70s, film was rather static in a way that it used to move in a certain given defined area. Now today's film is moving in a larger area, in a much more wider area. So it is posing greater challenges. I wish that these film writers, these lyricists who write today, care to know their language. Language is the biggest hit these days. सबसे बड़ा नुकसान जो हुआ है वो हमारी ज़बान का हुआ है. अच्छे पढ़े लिखे लोग भी, I'm sorry I'm speaking in the language which I should be speaking in for these emotional moments. सबसे बड़ा ज़िया जिसको कहते हैं, नुकसान जो हुआ है हमारी ज़बान का हुआ है, बहुत लोग जो उनको ज़बान बोलनी चाहिए जिस सिचुएशन में वो नहीं बोल पाते, they are not in a position, न लिख पाते हो ज़बान को. Language हमेशा ट्रांसफॉर्म होती है. I always say it's not a static language, it does grow in this manner. But then you have to know the roots of this language to understand the very sensibility, the mechanics of this language. So it is a general phenomenon. My son likes a certain kind of a film. My daughter-in-law wants a certain, both of them want a certain kind of a film. So they're in their room, they have a different kind of film going on. But in my room, we don't have that. वो हम कभी न्यूज़ देख लेते हैं और कभी कुछ और देख लेते हैं, और न्यूज़ भी ऐसी देखते हैं जो अक्सर बहकाती रहती है. So situation is very dynamic. And this life, experiencing life directly, face to face, shake hands with it and slap it whenever it doesn't suit you. Friends, I have taken more time than I was required to take. But Yahya Sahab, I must say that you are a great manager. And Neha ji, if you are here, you are a great manager. Colleagues at KCC, you are great managers. You have saved this moment in such a wonderful way. Great. I really appreciate that Azhar Sartawi could not come. Of course, some very important reason was there that he couldn't make it. But then we have made it wonderful. That is the point. The word chat is what we are using these days. There's really good literary chat that's going on around, a good cultural chat and a good filmic chat that we have had. Great. Many, many thanks to you for this. And we are going to have wonderful sessions tomorrow, day after. Yahya Sahab will tell you better about that.
Yes, sir. Bahut shukriya, sir. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Vijaya ma'am, also. Before I move ahead and request Saket for a formal word of thanks, here is just an announcement, because we seriously wanted to have the lecture of Nizar Sartawi, because we wanted to know what is happening there in the Arabic world, Arabic literary world, and especially Nizar Sartawi is a very big voice in Arabic poetry and as well as translation from Arabic to English. So we seriously wanted to know the things. Unfortunately, he was unable to join us today because there was some issue in his Jordanian Writers Association, something. But we have fixed the lecture on Saturday once again. After Anis sir's lecture, right after his lecture, I mean Anis sir's lecture finishes, we will have Nizar Sartawi's lecture on Saturday. So I request Saket now to extend a formal vote of thanks. Saket, please.
Thank you, sir. As Neha ma'am said, कि आपसे में अवसर जो हमारे प्रधानमंत्री ने कहा है, so we are so fortunate to have so many distinguished intellectuals and professors with us that इस आपदा को जो आया उसको बहुत ही अच्छे से जो handle किया, all the wonderful talks and lectures. Thank you Vijaya ma'am, thank you Sanjay Yadav sir, thank you Neha ma'am, Anisur Rahman sir. We actually had a great talk, a great discussion and a great lecture by all of you. I would like to extend my thanks to all of you, to all the participants who have been very cooperative and supportive with us. So thank you so much to all of you. We will be having the technical session from 4:45 onwards. The links have been given. We'll also be putting the link again in the chat box here. So you may join. The two chat rooms will be running parallelly, so you can join any one of those. So thank you so much, all of you, for this lecture.
And we should say thank to Aqib also. Aqib also joined with us.
Aqib sir. I missed the name. Sorry, Aqib sir. Aqib sir.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
We meet tomorrow at 9:30. What's time tomorrow?
Yes, sir. Tomorrow at 9:30 with Harish Narang sir. Lecture at tomorrow 9:30.
Right.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Great. All the very best. All the very best to everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir.